This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
So I pushed it back down as quickly as it came and carried on, believing I didn't notice the differences between us, and really not noticing that my own beginnings of insecurity were part of the reason I didn't. That same year, my mom's mother left Seoul to come live with us in Kansas. The first time I met her, I thought she was so different from my mom. I didn't know what a traditional Korean grandmother was supposed to be like, but mine didn't wear makeup or color her hair. I could tell from all the streaks of gray. She wore really simple clothes while my mom was always dressed to the nines, and during the many years she lived with us, she only ever spoke Korean. As different as they looked to me on the outside, I would learn to see that my mom and grandmother shared a past that ran deeper than anything. The history and heritage between them linked their hearts to a world I'd never known. They went everywhere together. They'd drop my sisters and me off at school together, help in my classroom together, show up at my track meets side by side. It seemed like the more the other kids saw my grandmother with me, the more convinced they became of how different I was. And being different meant getting called names. It meant eating alone. I grew up thinking I had two options, fit in or be called out. So I dressed the way the other girls dressed. I laughed off the insults. I told the other kids my middle name was Anne because it sounded more American than Lee. The lies I told out loud, though, weren't as harmful as the lies I was letting take root in my heart. That the person I was made to be wasn't good enough, that I'd have to learn to push aside the part of my family's history that didn't seem like it fit in the corner of the world I lived in. As I got older, I watched it play out with my mom as well, and how she pretended not to notice the slow glances at the grocery store or hear the quiet insult under someone's breath. So I pretended too. Eventually, the lunchroom teasing stopped. But by then, I'd spent nearly 12 years quieting half of who I was in a world I thought wouldn't accept it, that somewhat subconsciously I'd forgotten it was ever a part of me to begin with. It wasn't until those lonely weekends in New York that I felt a nagging sense that those lost parts of me were ready to be found. Manhattan is a beautiful mosaic of diverse races, personalities, and cultures. I stepped into that city as a 21-year-old, and I'd never seen so many people who look like me. I spent many weekends in Koreatown, as much for the sights and tastes and faces that reminded me of my mom and my grandmother, as for my growing interest in the rich culture I found packed into just a few blocks in the heart of Midtown. At first, it was our sameness that comforted me in a place that felt so big and foreign. But then it was the way they lived in the fullness of their culture that drew me back. The streets bustled with Asians of all backgrounds, and I couldn't help but see my own reflection in the young girls who passed by, hand in hand with their mothers. Finally, I was seeing the beauty of being different and the thrill of being unique. For the first time and maybe forever, I was proud of who I was, and I was realizing that the part of me that is different and is unique really is the most beautiful part of my story. I decided to get it all down on paper, the chapters of my life I'd shelved and let collect dust for too long. At night, I'd come home from my internship and I would write and write, everything. As quickly as my pen could keep pace with my heart, trailing its way across the page. I started with the earliest memory I could recall, all the way back to elementary school, detailing the moments I tried so hard to forget, the small yet significant characteristics of each one, to see if I could get close enough to feel them. All the teasing and all the lies I'd let take root in my heart, I crossed out and rewrote with truth. Before long, I was weeping for that little girl, for how long she'd gone through life believing that who she was wasn't enough. But this is what I'd learned during those painful nights. The only way to break free was to rewrite my story. Because something would happen every time my pen stopped, night after night. It was like my soul was coming back to my body, like the deepest parts of me that got knocked around and drowned out by all the crap I let the world convince me about who I was came back to the surface, and what was left was only what was real and true. As I sat there, with years of living and learning behind me, I wanted so badly to go back in time and tell that little girl that not only is she good enough, she's extraordinary. I didn't think that writing my story down would heal me, but it did. Whatever stuff I came to New York carrying, I could feel it start to untangle itself free. There are likely